Isang maganda, mainit-init at mapagpalayang hapon sa ating lahat. To our friends in Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Japan, Singapore, and China, from the Philippines, a beautiful, warm, and liberating afternoon to everyone. My name is Dini Lino Campo. I work for a coalition of NGOs in the Philippines, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. Today's event is organized by the Brahma Kumaris in the Philippines, a non-sectarian, non-stock, non-profit organization. Through Raj Yoga meditation, we help people from all walks of life and of any religion, race, or creed to rediscover their inherent goodness and develop spiritual awareness, attitude, and behavior. Our spiritual headquarters is located in Mount Abu in Rajasthan, India, which has a general consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations and the UNICEF. It is also affiliated to the UN Department of Public Information. So before we continue, we would like to announce that we are live streaming now on the YouTube channel of the Brahma Kumaris Philippines. Later on, you may ask questions by posting your questions in the chat box, and we will try our best to accommodate your questions during the Q&A portions. Okay, so welcome to the first of a series of conversations on the future of leadership. These unprecedented times call for unprecedented leadership. But how can we step up to this call? Well, today we'll talk about a kind of leadership that can help us navigate and thrive in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous new normal. It's called liberating leadership. We are delighted to have Mike George, our speaker, join us today from the UK. Mike is a meditator, a motivational speaker, and author of more than 15 books focused on self-awareness and personal enlightenment. In a unique blend of insight, wisdom, and humor, Mike brings together the key strands of the 21st century. These are management and leadership, emotional and spiritual intelligence, and continuous learning. For the last 30 years, he has coached, guided, and facilitated the executive development of managers and leaders in communities and companies in over 40 countries. So let's all welcome Mike with a virtual round of applause. Yes, you may use the Zoom icons to clap your hands. Mike, happy to share the virtual floor with you now. You're muted, Mike.
That helps, I think.
There, yes.
Thanks very much, Dini. Thanks for the introduction. And a very warm welcome to everyone. And thank you very much for, I was going to say tuning in, but for Zooming in. And we're still in the age of Zoom, as you probably noticed. And I'm speaking to you from the south of England, I think many thousands of miles away. So at least I can do that thanks due to technology.
Yes.
So the subjects that we're exploring today include, well, a combination of two issues really, what it means to be a leader in the modern world and how the world is actually developing in terms of VUCA, this very common and popular term now is VUCA. So we're in two parts. Part one is about why leadership needs to be liberated. And part two is really exploring that in the context of understanding what VUCA really means on the outside, the world around us outside, and also on the inside, the internal VUCA, if you like. I think everyone is familiar with the oldest and the wisest insight into leadership down through the ages, and that is that there's only one way to lead, and that is by example. Yeah, and the reason that wisdom sticks with us down through the ages is because there's always someone watching, and therefore there's always someone learning or absorbing or assimilating what behavior, what insights, the way we respond, our attitudes, etc. And if there's no one watching, then guess what? We are. I am. You are. We're watching ourselves. And this is why self-awareness is the red thread, really. It sort of cuts through everything that I'm going to talk about today. Unless there's an increase in self-awareness, then much of what I share with you today will just it'll be nice ideas and nice presentation, but won't really make that much difference to our lives personally until we increase, deepen, broaden our own self-awareness. But I'll explain a little bit more about that later. I think we all know the difference between manager and leader. And you know, the manager is 9 to 5, whereas leader is 24/7. Yeah, and manager is really what might appear on your business card. It's a position, basically, whereas leader might only appear in the minds of others when they decide to follow you, when they decide you are worthy of being followed. And so this difference between the two, one is very solid, material, positional, the other one is very unsolid, intangible. It's internal. It's a decision we all make in our own heads. So this is why leadership requires liberating. What I'm going to do with you in this first part is just share my screen with you a little bit and take you on a little bit of a journey into some of the attributes of the leader today. And let me do that again. And I should bring up. There we go. If I do that with my screen. So we're exploring this idea of why leadership requires liberation in the character of whoever aspires to be a leader. We're looking at the two issues of liberation and authenticity. And I'm going to share with you some basic characteristics of what it means to be an authentic leader and why we are trapped, why we need to be liberated from the traps in order to be able to express these particular characteristics. So number one characteristic is really the hardest one. It's called self-responsibility. And it's the big hurdle I need to kind of get everybody over in every seminar, workshop, or talk that I share or present. It's this idea that I am responsible for my own thoughts, my own feelings, my own behaviors. It sounds easy in theory, but in practice, we are taught the opposite. We're taught that other people are responsible. So we've cultivated the habit, or we're trapped in the habit. And the habit is just an automatic, subconscious action, either mentally or physically. This is the nature of habit. It's coming from our subconscious. It's people we've programmed it in. We've been taught how to program it in, but we've done the programming. And so we're kind of trapped in this automatic behavioral reaction. And so we need to break out of that trap if we're going to take full responsibility for our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And the habit, basically, in essence, really, is this projection of responsibility onto others for our thoughts, our feelings, what we say, and what we do as we react to others. So to take back responsibility is, in a sense, to take back our power, our individual power, and to take responsibility for our own thoughts, our own emotions that we feel. That sounds easy, but it's not so easy. The second characteristic is never to consider oneself to be the leader. And so an authentic leader doesn't consider themselves to be the leader. As long as you think, I am the leader, then it's highly likely you're not. And that's because we become identified with the idea of being the leader, and that stops us from demonstrating the behaviors of authentic leadership. So what we're doing is we start to operate from position consciousness. In other words, I have the position to be the leader in the context of these relationships. This is what makes leadership a little bit messy, a little bit like relationship itself. Relationships are messy. If you ask any married couple, they'll tell you that relationships are messy. And so leadership is messy because leadership is essentially about you and other people, not tasks, not jobs, not work, not positions, but it's about you and other people. And if there's the attitude that I am your leader, then from that attitude comes the arrogance. Yeah, you will, you have to, you must, and the attempt to control those that I'm leading. So it's quite challenging to not have this thought in relationship to others of I am the leader around here, especially if you're a manager. So the third characteristic is the ability to build empathic relationships. Again, it sounds easy in theory, but it's not an ability that we're taught formally. In fact, there's three things they don't teach us, certainly in our education here in the UK. I don't know about your part of the world. Three things they don't teach us is self-understanding. The second thing is how relationships actually work, the dynamic of relationship and what therefore empathy really means. And the third thing is no one ever teaches us how the world of money and finance works. I wonder why. That's another seminar, as they say. So the habit we need to break here in order to be more empathic towards others is our own mental and verbal judgment of others. One of the deepest habits that we learn from the entertainment industry, from the media, from the news, is this habit of judging others, mentally and verbally. And as long as you're judging others, it is shutting down your capacity to be sensitive to the emotions that others are feeling. That's really what empathy is. It's this sensitivity to the emotional state of the other person. And as long as I'm in a state of judgment about them and projecting that judgment onto them, then it's very difficult for me to cultivate and to express authentic sensitivity, empathy, basically, to what others are going through. And so this is an absolute necessity for all authentic leaders, because leadership is about leading people, not leading the task, not getting the job done, but getting the job done through people. The fourth characteristic is they consciously build trust with all others, not just a few, but with all others. And trust, I like this simple metaphor that every time you interact with others, it's like going to the bank. You either take money out or you put money in. So every time you interact with people, you're either investing in building the trust in that relationship, or you're diminishing the trust that you're building, or in this case, not building in that relationship. And there's 1,000 little ways in which we either build or diminish that trust in the relationship. And this is why we have this ancient understanding that leadership is only possible by example, because it's just in people watching you that they decide whether they trust you or not, or whether you are worthy of being trusted. So one of the habits that diminishes the trust in relationship is that we talk about other people behind their backs. In other words, we love to tell stories about what other people are up to, as opposed to our own stories. Or we blame them within those stories for the way things are going. So it's just one of many ways: breaking promises, being late for meetings, saying one thing and doing another, not walking the talk. All these are little ways in which we diminish our trust, levels of trust in our relationships with those who would see us as their leader. Characteristic number 5 is this idea that everyone is worthy of respect, regardless of what they've said or done on their journey so far. And one of my favorite stories here is penitentiaries in America. The worst penitentiary, this is about 10 or 15 years ago, I can't remember exactly when. I fell off my chair when I heard this story at a retreat many years ago. And the penitentiary in America with the highest drug abuse breakout rates and highest levels of conflict was in Dade County, Miami. And so a new governor came in and he said to all the warden, prisoners and staff and so on, all the staff and the wardens, he said, off you go. I want you to go on this 3-day customer service training program. So off they went on their 3-day customer service training. And then they came back into the prison and the warden said, prison governor said, he said, I want you to go back into the prison and treat the prisoners as if they were your customers. And of course, this was a strange request for many people. But then 2 years later, they did the study. And this prison had the lowest breakout, lowest levels of abuse and lowest levels of conflict in all the penitentiaries in America. And the reason was one word. And it was this word called respect. In other words, they went back in and instead of seeing the prisoners as low life level scum, they began to respect them as human beings, regardless of their history, regardless of what their intentions were. They began to give them respect and regard. And this changed the culture. Now, the habit trap that most managers fall into and stops them from becoming effective leaders is they expect to be respected. Yeah, in other words, it's the position of authority. It's the parent thing. The parent expects the child to respect them because they are the authority. They have the position of parent. So when you have the position of manager, it's so easy to expect yourself to receive respect because of the position. And so this is the habit that we get trapped in, because when we don't get that respect, then we become upset and we project that upsetness onto those who are not respecting us. You know? And so what we don't realize is not everyone is capable of giving respect because of their story, because of their journey, because of their upbringing. They find it hard to respect anyone, especially those in authority. Yeah, and so you have the tension between the two, this expectation to be respected, and then when you don't get respect, you generate emotional upsetness, and then you project it onto the other, and the relationship is sabotaged. It then requires a repair. Characteristic number 6 is the leader will have the humility of attitude. In other words, they'll have an attitude which is humble. Now, you can't pursue humility. You can't just turn on humbleness. It's not possible. You can't pursue virtue. This kind of takes us into a more spiritual territory. This is the understanding that consciousness is what you are. It's what each one of us is, and that you don't learn humility. You reveal humility, but you can only reveal it when you transform the habit of operating from the ego. And the ego is often based on position or the place that you come from or your personal qualities or the experience that you believe you have more of than others. And so the ego is essentially a false sense of who I am. So what we create is this false sense of who I am out of things like position and location and my own personal quality, my experience. As soon as you hear the word my position, my experience, then you know that the ego has kind of taken over. And it's actually what, at the deepest level, makes the individual leader inauthentic. And so it's impossible to have humility, to be humble, if the ego takes over in one's consciousness. So this is probably one of the deepest habit traps that we all learn, that we're all taught to fall into. And therefore, this is what makes liberation absolutely necessary. And I'm sure many of you have heard this word enlightenment, which is a form of liberation from this false sense of who I am. In other words, you stop making yourself heavy by identifying yourself with position, with your qualities, with your experience, and you lighten up, you're able to rise up. And as you lighten, then humility becomes a naturally rediscovered and revealed quality. It was always there, but it was just veiled by this false sense of who I am. The final characteristic I just want to mention today, and there are more than 7, there are many, many more than 7, but these are the basic 7, that the leader will demonstrate will be this idea of care. In other words, if you were to profile love in action, then one of the attributes or behaviors of love in action is caring. And if you don't like the word love, if it's too romantic for you, then substitute the word care. It's almost the same thing. And so this is why I think the famous Mother Teresa once said, do you love your people? Do you care for your people? So if you don't love them, then how are they going to know that you care about them, basically? And that's what people need. The authentic leader doesn't need to be loved because they've realized that that's what they are. And so it's an expression of that as care, when they care about the people that they lead. If they don't care, it means they haven't rediscovered themselves to be love as they are. And what they're liable to do, not in every situation, but they're liable to encourage and use fear, as a motivator. In other words, they will trigger the fears of others. They will trigger the stress of others by putting pressure on them, by threatening them, by trying to control them. In other words, becoming upset with them. They will trigger fear in the form of anxiety or tension or worry in others. So what they're doing is they're not causing the fear in others, but they're triggering it by their attitude, by their words, by their actions. They're triggering it as a motivator. And this is what's sometimes known as the lazy man's way to manage other people, by triggering their fear, their stress. And sure, people jump. The parent knows the child will jump if you get angry repeatedly, habitually at them, because the child eventually doesn't want to make the parent angry because the child has fallen under the illusion that they are responsible for the parent's anger. But the truth is, they're not. The truth is, the people who work for you do not cause you to feel angry, upset, emotionally disturbed in any way whatsoever. That's what you do to yourself. They may trigger, but they don't cause. But if you believe that they cause your anger, you also believe that you can cause their fear. You see the illusion we get trapped in. So we have to break out of this trap, break this illusion that it's not my job to make others, it's not their job to make me feel these emotions. It's what I do. This lovely old saying, which I often have to repeat to myself. It's not what you say or do to me that makes me feel this way. It's what I do with what you say or do that makes me feel this way. And so this restores the mastery of my energy, my consciousness, in essence. But it's not easy because we're taught to believe that other people cause how we feel, and therefore we believe that we can cause them to feel fear. And so we use that as a motivator. And the moment you trigger other people's fear, then you're actually saying, I don't really care about you as long as you are scared enough to get the job done. So these are just 7 characteristics of the authentic leader that have behind them habits that we need to be liberated from. And that's why it's called liberating leadership, is that we all have the capacity, the potential to demonstrate these characteristics, but we find it difficult because we are trapped, in a cell, in a prison, in a habit, in a series of habits of our own making. So Dini, let me stop there and just see if there's any questions or anything that you would like to say.
Yes, Mike, thank you very much. It's not only liberating leadership, but really very challenging kind of leadership. Already, I can see a lot of points in the seven essential points that you mentioned that I need to work on. And it struck me when you said that self-awareness is really the basic thing here. It cuts through everything because there's a big need to really watch ourselves and not just depend on others to watch us and listen to them, listen to their feedback, etc. So I would have to spend a lot of time working on myself as a leader, given these 7 essential points that you mentioned. Just to let you know and everyone know as well that we have 232 participants on YouTube and 222 in Zoom. So if the questions start coming in, a lot of questions start coming in, we'll try to organize them the best that we can and forward to you the questions given our time limitations. So here's one from JP from Singapore, Mike. He says, Mike, I'm a huge fan of yours. Sometimes we start to evaluate how a manager is handling a matter and start to think of an alternate method you think may be better without having negative feelings about that manager. Is this a sign that you are ready for increased responsibility?
It might be. And then again, it might not, because you're talking about an isolated incident here, and so there might not be consistency. But if you have a better idea, then it's beholden to you, or it's in a sense, it's your duty to suggest that idea, to offer it, and then to walk away, basically. The manager themselves has the decision to make, and they will make the decision ultimately, not you. So you offer the idea and walk away. And the more you do that, the greater value you make yourself to the process of getting the job done. And the greater the value you make yourself to that process over a period of time consistently, then it's more likely you will receive a greater responsibility as that time goes on.
Okay, for a leader who wants to start his or her own inner journey like this, as you have shared with us, work on these 7 points so that he or she can exercise authentic leadership. How does one start?
I'm going to talk about that at the end.
Okay, second part of the forum. Okay, that's good. Especially for business leaders, Mike, I think we think these 7 points are quite radical because practically speaking, how can these 7 points support business leaders who are expected to produce more and achieve greater year in, year out? It looks like, yeah, okay.
If there's an expectation to produce more, then it means you have to work more effectively with the people that work for you. If you have a management position in any sense, then you are responsible to lead those people forward. And so to do that more effectively is to be more authentic in your humanness. Not
Mm,
your manager,
okay.
but your humanness. So if you're a more authentic human in your position as a manager, then people will respond more proactively and more effectively to how you're working together. And so you will get more done. It's a little bit like, you know, that many people believe that competition is the way that the world,
Yes.
but actually it's really more about cooperation. And so how do I know the difference between the two? Well, when the consultants come in, are they going to keep the individual who's always cooperating with others, or are they going to keep the individual who's always competing with others? In other words, the person who's competing to get up the ladder because they're ambitious, they want to get ahead, they want to beat the next guy down, and so they're always playing games in the relationships. Or the person who's cooperating is always there to help others, always there to assist, to support, to encourage others. Who's the person you're going to value most in your organization? I think it's going to be the one who cooperates and who's demonstrated the consistency of cooperation over time. And so, in a sense, you have to work out, you have to challenge your own belief system that you have learned and assimilated from society, from culture, from parents, from the organizations you work for so far. Are you there to compete, or are you there to cooperate? The authentic leader will always hold on out the hand of cooperation. How can I help you do what you have to do better? Always there, never to put the other person down.
Okay, thank you, Mike. There's another question from Oliver. Very liberating topic and humbling for a leader. His question is, how can I make my boss aware of these characteristics? He is, as a subordinate, how can I live as authentic and liberating leader?
There's two ways to make them aware. You can send them a link to the to the recording of the session.
Yeah.
But the best way, of course,
Okay.
is to model those behaviors for them. In other words, if it's a question of respect, always respect not the position but the person. In other words,
Person.
give respect to the individual. It doesn't cost me anything. But if there's any resentment of that individual, if there's any resentment of that person being in that position, if there's any history of blame or complaint towards that person, even just mentally, then I need to dissolve those memories in order to be able to express authentic respect for that person as a human being. So modeling these principles is really the primary way to influence others, not control or change, but to influence those around you.
Here's a comment. Most managers I came across are what you may call as managers by mistake. The job deliverables are way over their heads. So also as an authentic employee or as an authentic teammate of a manager or leader like that, one I suppose also has to work on our own self-awareness so that hopefully we can see beyond, go beyond position consciousness, and as you said, look at probably my boss, your manager, leader as a person. Primarily, and the manager or leader secondly.
Right answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Let me come
If you're, yes,
second.
yes, Mike, go ahead.
So, when you're watching someone who you have judged and decided they are not capable, they should not be in that position. In other words, you've lost yourself in your judgment. In other words, my role is not to see the person as the position, but to see them as a human being. How can I help them? Doesn't matter what my position is, no matter what their position is, how can I help them do what they have to do? Now, if I have a greater awareness or a greater set of skills or a greater ability than they do, and that often happens in organizations, then it's down to me to contribute, to make a contribution of those skills to the overall effort. And that may sometimes involve helping someone in a higher position, helping someone else be a better leader. That's why in many organizations, the real leaders, they're not the managers, they're the team members, or they're the cleaner, basically, because they demonstrate attitudes and behaviors which are more towards authentic leadership, as opposed to the manager who's just protecting their position, holding on to, believing I'm the person who has to be seen to be doing things around here. And so they tend to be coming from this place of the ego of position. So don't deny your talents. Don't suppress your ability to help. Don't take away your support for someone just because you've decided, you've judged them to be less than capable in a particular situation.
That's a very powerful way of looking at ourselves. Regardless of position, it's really also about, I suppose, respecting ourselves and respecting our relationship with other people. So I'll really see to it that I apply that also at work. Here's, I think, the last question for the first part from Clifford. If your superior shows no characteristic of a leader, how can you let him or her know?
We've just done that question, really, in a sense.
Okay. Okay.
They're in the position. They're not able to demonstrate leadership qualities at the moment, and so show them how. Be a good example for them. Mm-hmm. Remember, leadership qualities are not really things you do. They're attitudes, which comes from your own mindset, your own consciousness. So what's your mindset? What's your consciousness? Is it just to keep putting that person down in your mind, to diminish that person in your mind? Because then you're just diminishing yourself. Remember, everyone exists in two places at once. They're out there, but they're also in your consciousness. And you're having a relationship really with your version of the person, not the reality of the person out there, but your version of the person in your consciousness. And that's a mistake. Yeah, because then you're not connecting to the other. You're just connecting and affirming and growing your version, which will be according to how you are in yourself. Yeah. In other words, if you're a bit dark inside, you'll create someone darkly. If you're what they call negative in your mind, then you'll be more inclined to create someone when they're not really negative. They're just doing the best they can, but you are deciding to see what you're already creating in your own consciousness. So this is why, again, it needs to be me demonstrating, modeling these particular characteristics, and then asking myself, why can't I do that? Why can't I respect this person? Why can't I take responsibility for my own thoughts and feelings? I've got to be curious and find out what's in the way, what's trapping me, what's keeping me captured on the inside. It's not me, it's not them, it's me. It's never them, it's always me, something within me. So that's why curiosity is necessary. It's good.
Good, Mike. Yeah. So that's all for the part one. A lot of treasures to really make use of, to value for our inner growth, for our role as leaders and also team members of leaders. So I think we're ready to move on to the second part.
Good.
Thank you.
So let me share my screen again. And now we go into part two and really exploring this idea of VUCA, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with, but looking more particularly at the skills and mindsets that are required to really get under the skin and to use VUCA in the right way. So what is VUCA? It really is about just 4 dimensions that we can, or 4 windows that we can look through as we try and get a sense of the changes that are coming. Yeah, and we try and make sense of those changes. And it's often said that we live now in a VUCA world, which really means a volatile world. And it's about perceiving the pace of the changes that are taking place in the world alongside the nature of the changes that are taking place in the world. Now, I'm not here to do that in this particular session because, I mean, this is a conversation that goes for much longer than the hour we have together. But if you do this, if you start to do this with your team, then you'll do something called build a vision of what's coming. You know, it's a little bit like when Shell had the oil, went through the oil crisis many decades ago. A team of them got together with a flip chart and they said, what's going to happen in the oil industry in the next sort of 20, 30, 40, 50 years? And they ended up coming down to two scenarios. This will happen or that'll happen. And they chose one and they chose the right one. And so their decisions, their management practices, their industry involvement became based on this one particular understanding of the volatility of the oil market in the next 20 years. And of course, they created a vision of how they were going to respond to do that. And so it's about grappling with the uncertainties of life. Yeah? In other words, can we predict the changes that are coming and the effects that they will have? Well, of course, we can't fully predict because life is, by nature, uncertain. It's impossible to predict the future, but we can get a sense of what's coming. You know, we can follow the trends up to this point, we can look into the future, and we get a sense of what's coming. But we need to focus our consciousness on that. And the more we do, the more we understand the nature of the territory ahead, the nature of the changes that are coming down the line. Now, those changes are going to be complex. We're living in an incredibly complex world. Things are not becoming simpler, largely due to technological change. And so there are issues that are arising. There is chaos, which is now occurring. And so the complexity, the interlinkedness, the connectedness of these issues is becoming more intense because the world is becoming smaller. Everything's more interconnected. And so the more we explore this complexity, these complexities, not to get absolute, final, right, certain answers, but the clearer we become. This is how we achieve this clarity of vision as we look into the future, as we explore the complexities that are likely to occur and the effects they will have. But of course, it's all very ambiguous. Yeah, what does it all mean? What's the meaning of life? Ultimately, is the question. Why am I here? Why are we here? What are we doing this for? What's our purpose, etc.? And so all these questions come up in the process of what human beings are designed to do, which is to make life meaningful. But no one teaches us how to do that. It's like we have to discover. And the way to discover it is to have this conversation. So what does this mean? What does that development mean? What does this change mean? And the more you're able to do this, the more flexible, the more agile you are in whatever context you find yourself in the organizational context, in the family context, in whatever context you're operating in. So these are the four characteristics, and I've tried to simplify them as much as possible and show you where they lead when you have the conversation. And it is really about conversation. It's more about talking with people, throwing around ideas, learning to understand where others are coming from, learning about their perceptions, because we all bring a different color to the canvas, as they say, a different strand to the conversation. So to do that, to enter into that conversation, I need, as a leader of the conversation, to develop different mindsets. And I need to be adaptive, flexible in my mindset. I need to be able to let go of my opinions, to entertain the opinions, the perceptions, the perspectives of others. I need to be able to be one who is a facilitator of a culture of greater engagement. You know, am I prepared to bring people together and facilitate the process of the conversation. Can I do that? Do I have the skills to do that? Do I have the intention to do that? And so the underlying intention that will help me is this intention to continuously learn. There's always something new to learn. That's not new, it's ancient. And some people, they say, well, I'm always learning, but they aren't really. They don't want to go too deeply. They're just kind of stuck at the level they're at because they're comfortable. So am I prepared to be uncomfortable with what I learn? Unless I'm prepared to be uncomfortable, have my beliefs challenged, then I'm not really in continuous learning. I need to be able to communicate clearly with others. So in other words, communicate a new vision, a different vision, be able to justify the shifts, the changes that VUCA conversations will obviously give rise to. I need to be able to anticipate and create change within the local environment of the team relationships themselves. Am I prepared to see, what people are doing and not doing? Am I prepared to change their position, their priorities? Am I prepared to challenge people? Am I prepared to change the culture of the organization or the team? If I'm not prepared to do that, it's very difficult to make decisions that are not going to be popular. And I can't be an effective leader unless I'm prepared to make decisions that are not popular with others. I think most leaders will know that. Always increasing self-awareness. In other words, this is the basis of all of these mindsets, all of these skills, is this idea of increasing my own self-awareness. Knowing myself as awareness itself is the ultimate. In other words, I'm always going to say consciousness is what I am, is what you are. Position, role, nationality, profession, these are all labels, and I'm not a label. You are not a label. Consciousness is what I am. That in itself requires deep contemplation and understanding. So this becomes then the basis of clear decision making. In other words, I get rid of doubt. I make a decision and I'm determined to follow through on that decision because that decision is coming from a clear insight and understanding of what we talked about before, the changes that are coming down the line, the anticipated changes. I need to develop emotional intelligence. In other words, if I'm going to build empathic relationships, I need to understand the emotional states of others. And to do that, I need to understand why I become emotional and to be able to manage my own emotional state. I mean, that's one topic that we could spend a week together talking about. Building networks of collaboration. As a leader, am I outgoing enough to make connections with even the people I'm competing with? Many years ago, the top technology companies got together to create a chip that they could all use. And so you would think they were in competition, but they ended up collaborating in designing and making a chip that they could use in all their technological toys, basically. And this happened some years ago. I'm not sure if they still do it, but they did it once. And then create space for people development. My responsibility as a leader is to allow, encourage, make the space for people to grow and develop and find their fullest potential. That then is what gives me one of the greatest satisfactions, when people do that for themselves. I don't do it. I don't develop people. People develop themselves, but I create the space, the opportunity, the windows and the doors into it for themselves. So I keep repeating this idea of conversation because VUCA really is about conversations, and it's about the 11th mindset or skill. Do I initiate conversations around volatility? And that just might be answering or asking two simple questions. What factors, conditions have increased in volatility in your industry in the last 10 years? And so I look to the past, first of all, to try and get a sense of the trends, the patterns. And then question number 2, in what areas do you see future volatility in the world that may affect your business in the coming years? And so we look to the past, then we look to the future, and then we get a trend, we follow a trend, and then we might see things that interrupt that trend, that get in the way. So I'm not going to go through all of the areas, but the basic question is a question about the past, a question about the future. Complexity in the past, complexity in the future, uncertainty in the past, uncertainty in the future. So these are the bases of what's called the VUCA conversation. And it has to be that because we spark each other, we stimulate each other. Yes, of course, I can do it on my own, but it's of much greater value when I can do it with others. In the background is the awareness of context. It's necessary to be aware that we live in the age of convergence, and we have all the converging technologies, if not converging nations in the world, as the world becomes smaller and interconnected, and globalization makes the world smaller. So there's also the age of conversion in technology. Yesterday we used to have a phone, a computer, calculator, and of course now those functions and many others are in one little instrument that we stick in our pockets and we carry around with us all the time. And so this is the age of conversion. Everything is converging into everything else. And so does that affect my industry? There are disruptors in just about every industry. Have we looked for what might be totally different, so disruptive to the trends of the industry so far? Hotels, taxis, travel companies, they're all online now. They're all using the internet. And so they've disrupted the traditional ways those industries have been done. Artificial intelligence is the one great big wave that's coming at us all. And it's the one that's driving much of the political and technocratic change in the world today. Artificial intelligence is coming, and some say it's going to be the most dangerous thing in the world. Others say, no, it's not. And so have we had this conversation about how that's going to affect our business? Because just that one factor alone will increase automation. And so less people in work, more machines doing what people used to do means how do we manage those people? These are conversations we need to have. And what we're watching globally now is what's called the rise in technocracy. In other words, politics is transforming itself into a technocratic society. A politically led society is turning into a technocratically led society because technology is becoming so dominant in how and where and when it seeps into the cultures of every country in the world. Now, you might think all of these are progress. You might think all of these are progressive movements towards a better world. But then don't forget that you need to understand the law of entropy. And entropy basically reminds us that all energy moves from order to chaos. And that tells me personally, I'm not saying it should tell you, that tells me that increased chaos is coming. And that chaos is coming in every field, because that entropy doesn't just apply to physical energy, where physical energy moves from an ordered state into a more chaotic state. You can't get it back to that original ordered state. It's not possible. And it also applies to the energy of consciousness. And what we're watching today is the diminishment or the chaos in consciousness called emotion taking over from what used to be grounded, solid human values. So emotion is shaping our decisions more than our values are shaping our decisions. That's a very quick, essenceful look at what entropy means to consciousness. It's a much deeper and more extensive subject than that. So that brings us to the inner VUCA. In other words, have you looked at yourself? And so volatility means, are you reacting instead of responding? Anytime you react to anyone or any situation, it means you, the conscious being, are not in control. The emotion that you've created has taken over, usually out of habit. So there's volatility. In other words, I just need to say one word and you react. And that means you're volatile. Is there uncertainty? Are you allowing your fears, to stop you taking risks? In other words, do you carry the habit of being uncertain in your consciousness? That means you need to change something within yourself. Complexity, are you able to see and perceive with clarity? Or is it cloudy? Is the world you're watching, is it cloudy? Is the world of your thoughts, your decisions, your feelings, is it cloudy in there? Or do you know exactly where they're coming from, why you're thinking this, why you're making that decision, why you have this attitude? Is there clarity? No, because there's a lot of complexity. I don't see the connection between all these things. And so it's necessary to sit quietly and perceive clearly. And so ambiguity in your consciousness means, is your mind quiet enough, focused enough for you to see, to perceive the meaning of events? This takes us into the territory of what's called spiritual intelligence. And someone who is spiritually intelligent, they'll never be surprised or shocked by anything that happens out there or in here, because they know the meaning of the event. They can ascribe meaning to the event, not something, once again, we're taught at school. So the practices to conduct your inner VUCA, if you like. Number one, meditation and contemplation. Meditation is simply the cultivation of self-awareness. Contemplation takes you to the deepest place where you begin to see and know the meaning of things for yourself, as opposed to needing to listen to people like me or read books, etc. Then the practice of detached involvement, and this is the idea of stepping back, not getting involved, but yet remaining engaged. Lovely book title. I think it's called Self-Management, The Art of Managing by Detached Involvement. It's a recognized management skill. How to be detached doesn't mean say you don't care or you avoid, you run away. How do you be detached and yet engaged in whatever's going on around you with other people? Being a servant leader, do you have the consciousness of the servant leader? You've heard of this term. In other words, I'm here to serve other people primarily before I serve myself. I'm here to serve their needs before my own needs are served. The closest you get to this today is the authentic mother. She's prepared to sacrifice and serve her children before she will look after her own needs. Am I able to do that as a leader? Whoa, that's challenging. And then we talked earlier on about continuous learning, which really will take you ultimately into continuous unlearning, because eventually you will notice that what stops you being authentic is what you've already learned, what you've already assimilated, what society's already taught you. And so these belief systems, these habits need to be unlearned, undone, unentangled in your consciousness. And that in itself is another seminar. So there is such a thing as the wise leader. The wise leader says, well, some people say, don't just sit there, do something. So this is called reactivity. We're going to do something quick. But the wise leader says, and I'm sure you know this saying, don't just do something, sit there. And the reason they say that is that take a few moments, pause, press the pause button, and look and think deeply. I don't mean sit there like that, not sitting lazily, but sitting more like that, where you really sit to contemplate, to meditate, to allow your intuitive wisdom to come from the deepest place in your consciousness to the surface. And then you might be able to realize that I know I do not see the world as it is. It's interesting, isn't it? I see the world as I am. Kind of mentioned it earlier on. The world isn't outside, it's primarily in your consciousness. And that's called the material paradigm. To believe the world, the primary realities out there, is the material paradigm. And that's why we're having such a problem now with the environment, with the elements, with the climate, with the material aspects of life around us. That's why it's in chaos, because we have forgotten that we are the creators of the world in our own consciousness. So to finish off, some recommended reading. I would recommend you pick this up somewhere, Google it, Desiderata. It's a beautiful little piece of philosophy. And if you read this every day until you remember it, you'll start to embody it, and then you will inspire, empower others around you naturally. It's a beautiful little piece of wisdom that starts off with, go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there is in silence. Yeah. I won't read the whole thing. I'll let you Google it, download it, and then take it with you to work tomorrow, and then become it. Yeah. Allow it to trigger the deepest and most beautiful parts of your own consciousness. And I just need to say thank you. Thank you for zooming in, as they say. And I hope some of that is a little bit useful.
Thank you very much, Mike. We really appreciate how you presented VUCA first in its very negative tone to something positive, that we can actually transform the negative VUCA into positive VUCA, and how you presented the various changes that have been happening, systemic changes, systemic and global changes that are the practical, pragmatic side to the work of leaders. No? And then you brought us into a realization that there can be an inner VUCA, and that we actually need to first work on that inner, probably negative VUCA, and transform it into positive inner VUCA. And so how you also presented the first part of your lecture on the 7 characteristics, and how those are really foundations for us to be able to work on our inner VUCA. And then therefore we can adapt, and we can have a positive vision of the future, of the now and of the future, and then work on our understanding of change, and be more clear in the way we think and we relate with people and make decisions. And A is adapt, the ability to adapt to the external changes, because we have first worked on our own inner VUCA needs. We still have a couple of questions here, Mike. And it's very interesting how fear commonly comes up, commonly comes up in our relationships with leaders and our managers. So there's a question here: how do you reconcile the 7 characteristics with the idea that effective leaders are those who are being feared? I think this is very common, particularly in Asian countries, where authority figures are really looked up to and very much respected. So in a culture like that, in an Asian culture, which gives a lot of importance to authority figures, fear is really commonly felt, commonly used to manage people. So how do you reconcile the 7 principles with the idea that effective leaders are those who are being feared?
It depends what you mean by effective, and over what period of time, and where they're leading people to. So the person who induces fear or triggers fear in others is actually teaching others that it's good to be fearful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so over time, that's going to drain energy. It's going to ultimately lead to physical health, which is not so good. And it's ultimately going to demotivate people and just create resentment. And
Yeah.
so that's why it's the lazy man's way to manage, is to use fear, other people's fear, to motivate them. And so what you're also teaching them is that the fear is coming from outside. Their fear from outside. You're not helping them be the masters of their own consciousness and realize that they are actually the creators of their fear. So it's all to do with ego, it's all to do with fear. And you're quite right, that in many countries, and that's what we're talking about, that's what we're seeing now, the autocratic, tyrannical leader is kind of taking over. And that's this aspect of the chaos that's taking place. It's like it's necessary. It's got to be cleaned out over time. It's necessary to move into that space so that there'll be those who say, well, I'm not going to respond to this. I'm not going to be motivated by this. And then there'll be those, like in the UK now, most people, it's easy to trigger their fear. I just to finish off, I talked to a guy some months ago, and he was saying, and that just kind of registered with me, is that we have just been watching the most effective marketing campaign in the history of the human race. And of course, it's the marketing of the virus. It's not really the virus that's the problem, it's fear that's the problem. Is that people are so easily triggered into a fearful state that they've manipulated those people into that state. And so that's what's kind of happening now. That's what's been happening for the past year and a bit. So that's why you see this separation of those who've, I'm not falling in that trap, and the vast majority who are falling into that trap. So all you do is stand back and watch.
Okay. Another question, Mike. Probably this will be the last one. Hi, from Elizabeth Hampson. She says, "Hi, Mike. Thank you so much. Please advise how do we manage our jealousy and the ability to be happy for our teammates when they do well, if we are all competing against each other in our sales job?"
If you try and take those people through a transition period where there's a shift in the values, if you have to have the conversation, because many of them will be there because they are competitive by nature. And so that has to be like little bits of ice cream to the child for the first time, a little bit of ice cream, and they want more. So give them a taste of what cooperation is. Give them a taste of what it means to help each other. Give them a taste of them combining their targets, say, so that they both achieve the target together. So give them little tastes of cooperation. And then they might be able to, I don't know, I just don't know what the environment's like, but they might be able to begin to operate eventually from a culture of cooperation and a culture of competition. But it might be quite challenging because many people who get their jobs, it's because they are so competitive by nature. They've got the habits ingrained, and habits really have belief systems at their core. And so they've been taught to believe to be competitive is the best way, the progressive way, the successful way. They've got those beliefs in their subconscious. And so you've got people in the team who are probably carrying that. And so you might be fighting an uphill battle to try and swing them over to cooperation. But try it. You can try it by finding ways to give them a little taste of what it's like to help each other, basically.
Okay, and then, there's another one. Okay, this is the last one. The world is divided between teachings of religious leaders as opposed to spiritual leaders. How would you envision that the liberating leadership values and qualities can bring about the changes that the world is waiting for, all for good, peaceful living?
I did a book recently which contrasts religion and spirituality. It's called Untangling Religion and Spirituality. And the essence of the difference between the two is religion says you must believe this or there'll be consequences. Whereas spirituality says, don't believe anything, see for yourself. In other words, reawaken your knowingness. Because when you believe, it means you don't know, it means you doubt. So that's why I would say to you, you mustn't believe a word I say. See for yourself. In other words, everything I've said is kind of not meaningless, but it's kind of not going to make any difference to your life until you see for yourself, until you can map the territory for yourself, make your own maps, if you like, find your own meanings. And that's you as the spiritual being doing that for yourself. as opposed to needing to be told it as information from others like me, and then using that information to create more beliefs, which won't really work anyway, because you've already got a set of beliefs that you've been holding on to for a long, long time. Yeah. And they'll clash in your consciousness, and that will provide tension. So you have to be prepared to do the work. This is the work of waking up. This is the work of becoming aware. This is self-awareness, basically. Hey, listen, Dini, thank you very much for time and energy. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and good luck.
Thanks so much.
Good luck on the journey.
Thank you, Mike. Actually, we have a long list of questions for you on YouTube, but of course, we cannot ask each question now. For in interest of time, we have to end soon. So thank you, Mike. Yes, Mike.
If you send the questions through, send them to me. I will answer them on paper. Okay? Great.
We'll also see how we can accommodate also the questions in the succeeding conversations on the future of leadership series.
Up there, but if you send me all the questions on Zoom and all the questions online, if you send them to me, I'll answer them and send you back the answers.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's been a pleasure learning from you this afternoon. It's now evening. Thank you for all the challenges that you posted to us today. Self-awareness and valuing respect and practicing humility, empathy, etc. Looking at the external world, the external VUCA, the VUCA in the external world, but we shouldn't stop there. We really have to still work on the inner VUCA that we need, so we can adapt and thrive in this in the new normal. So thank you very much. And so before we close this program, I would like to call on Sister Rajni to guide us in meditation. Sister Rajni is a meditator and Raj Yoga teacher for more than 45 years. She is the national coordinator of the Brahma Kumaris in the Philippines and Japan. Sister Rajni.
Thank you, Dini. Greetings of peace. So let us take few moments to stay in silence, to experience our inner qualities, inner values of leadership. I become aware that I am a spiritual being. I am filled with divine qualities of peace, respect, humility, strength, balance. I am energy, the spiritual energy, the soul. Very still. And calm. I allow myself to experience calmness, stillness. I am peaceful. I lead my life with these core values. Inner values. I remain aware of my inner qualities and strength. I respect myself. I respect others. I connect the mind with the source of all positivity, the divine. Every day, spend 2-3 minutes in silence before starting the day, or job or work. Just being aware of my inner core values of deep stillness and peace. Thank you very much. Thank you so much joining for meditation.
Thank you very much, Sister Rajni. So for our closing segment, may I call on the President of the Brahma Kumaris Philippines Foundation, Gonzalo Serrano Jr., for the closing remarks.
Greetings of peace on behalf of Brahma Kumaris Philippines. we'd like to express our heartfelt gratitude to respected Mike George as he gave his valuable time and wisdom on today's topic. We also like to thank the participants via Zoom and YouTube, not only in the Philippines, but also in other countries. Thank you so much. And also thank you for also the team for this session, Mr. Rajni, Merly Pimentel, Jonathan Batangan, Dini Ocampo, Maggie Polito, and others. So, Mike, as a token of our appreciation and thanks, please accept this bouquet of sunflowers representing long life, good fortune, and vitality. Again, thank you, Om Shanti.
Okay, thank you, June. Thank you very much, June. So today's conversation was live streamed on the YouTube channel of the Brahma Kumaris Philippines. So visit the channel to watch, listen, and study today's conversation again, or share it with your family, friends, and colleagues. Lastly, we are excited to announce that the second of the series on the future of leadership, entitled Inner Peace, Inner Power for Busy Leaders, will be held on September 18, 2021. The same time, 5 to 6 p.m., also on Zoom. Our speaker will be Yogesh Jarda. He's a personal development trainer for over 20 years in Europe, UK, the Americas, Middle East, Australasia, and the Caribbean. He's also the national coordinator of the Brahma Kumaris in Turkey. So mark your calendars now. So that's all. Thank you, everyone. Maraming salamat sa lahat at daghang salamat sa tanan. Thank you very much, everyone. Keep safe and healthy every day. Till the next webinar on September 18.